So you want to get rid of your depression? No. So you want a Geo Metro? Why are we still asking about this? So you want a Porsche 944? No, you don't. You don't. Trust me. You don't. You're not even a 924, okay? All right? Okay, whoa, 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 whoa. There is one in there that actually felt pretty good when it came down to people wanting another So You Want, okay? It's a car that probably nobody actually knows about, which is gonna make me happy, all right? There's a few cars out there in this world that just make you feel some sort of way, especially in the 80s, probably because there's so many drugs. But the 911s were trying to kill you. The Camaros were trying to only get you to cut the sides of your hair, and the Lamborghinis were just like parallelograms. And while the rest of the world was getting all the attention in the world, there was a car that got just about next to, I don't know, maybe a little less than none, all right? A car that maybe, if you're over the age of 30, you'd probably remember, and you're already in the comments getting angry at the fact that I just told you that nobody knows this car, okay? A car that people probably wish we didn't talk about because it could appreciate in value, and I hope it actually does. A car that went toe-to-toe in RX-7s and 300 ZXs of the time. I'm Alex, Alex@FI on Instagram, and today we're gonna be talking about a car that you've likely never heard before until now. A car that you're willing to watch 10 minutes about and then likely forget after you go back to making a hot dog with a bread bun because we don't have enough money, we forgot to buy the bread buns. It's just the thing that happens. You just have to fold it in there, put a slice of cheese, you'll be ready to go with some Kraft singles. All right, ladies and gentlemen, today we're gonna be talking about you wanting to own a Mitsubishi Starion / Conquest / StarQuest. And if you're just jumping into this video, hi. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you're new to the channel, just be sure to say hi below. And don't forget, we keep making banging videos like this, so like a subscribe, even though it doesn't really do anything anymore, still kind of makes us feel good. So, I mean, there's that. And if you're looking for aftermarket wheels, tires, or suspension for your newly acquired Mitsubishi Starion, even though there's like 4 of them left, you can actually check that out over at fitmentindustries.com. The Mitsubishi Starion was a 2-door rep Porsche 924. Kidding. All right? It's a turbocharged 4-cylinder that was manufactured by Mitsubishi from 1982 to 1989. The 80s were an interesting time because it was just before the pre-boom of the Japanese market. Now, you may know the Mitsubishi Starion, but some of us know it as the Chrysler Conquest. Yee-haw, all right? Chrysler used to do that sort of stuff. It's the whole DSM bridging that happened in the 90s. It's a pretty exciting time. And if you believe in astrological symbols and all that there's some bonus points for you. The Starion name comes from a contraction of the star of Arion, which refers to the mythical horse, Arion, in the sky next to the moon. Yeehaw times 2. We saw this rebadged car pretty much happen all throughout the 80s and 90s, especially with Mitsubishi, Dodge, and Plymouth, because it just happened across the board to import the cars. Made in both narrow body and wide body, the car was quite the actual looker. It had a non-intercooled lower horsepower variant for the narrow body and a high performance pay-to-play version, which had the intercooled, and that was the wide body essentially. These ones got the title of different variants of either an ESIR, and you had the other one that had the TSI. Essentially, depending on what country you were in, was dependent upon how the trim determination was there for you. All you pretty much had to remember is that as they added numbers or letters, because everybody gets excited with acronyms, especially in the automotive culture, it just got better. But no matter the badge, they were all built at the same assembly line in Japan, and Mitsubishi tried its damnedest to compete with the big names with it. And in the 80s, Mitsubishi was actually doing a fairly good job at it. And when it initially came out, it did pretty well. The ESIR, or wide body turbo variant that came out in the later years, did pack a little bit of a punch, and the Mitsubishi Starion was just a little bit too late, which is why only like 12 people know about it. Sure, it had a turbocharger, and sure, it had an intercooler, and eventually, sure, it had a limited slip differential, but it was battling these weird things like the EPA. Restrictions on the cars, especially the performance variants, were just getting really strict, and it had to go through new exhaust systems, new intake systems, and 17 catalytic converters, and it just started getting a little tough. That on top of the fact that the importation laws on lead gasoline for engines continued to put pressure on this Japanese 924. It had the iconic 2-liter 4G63, it had McPherson struts, it had disc brakes, and just a touch, It was just a touch more reliable than its European counterparts. You see, Mitsubishi was king or queen of turbocharging cars back in the day. It's pretty much what they did, and they did it really well. It's what they were known for. That paired with the 4G63, which at the time was pretty revolutionary through its use of twin balance shafts and electronic fuel injection, it probably should have won. Like, it just should have. All right? The cars battle between emissions, the heavy Japanese competition during the market boom of the 90s, which is essentially why you see the FD RX-7s and the 3000 GTs and the Skylines and all those cars just rocketing in terms of technology, and the fact that Mitsubishi eventually wanted to put their hope into a different coupe model.
Eclipse, Talon, Dodge, all that stuff.
And you pretty much had the fact that the Starion just wasn't gonna stay alive. They pretty much sacrificed it. Just happens sometimes. The car didn't get the follow-up tech it needed to survive the competition, and by the time the middle to late 80s came about, people started to see that the Starion wasn't gonna stay alive for very long, and the interest in the car would eventually die. The Starion would be a car that would run rallies and win, all right? Race and it would win. It had a fake hood scoop, sure, all right? But its titles are nothing to goof about, all right? It just didn't last long enough for any of us to see it because it didn't crest into the booming 90s. But we're not here to talk about you wanting to own one of these bad boys. We're here to talk about what it's like to actually own one of these Japanese, lean, slick fighting machines that still doesn't have an appreciation tax yet. Thank God, all right? So you want a Mitsubishi Starion or any of the 9 different million trim types of that specific car? Well, set down your DSM argument and pick up your favorite Rust-Oleum, because we're about to talk about what it's like to actually own one of these. The Mitsubishi Starion is a car that was essentially just lost in the sauce. Ask many people and they have no idea or clue what they're actually looking at. And that's what makes them so underappreciated and awesome. All right, they're pinnacle 80s design, all right, that feature too many hard lines and aggressive front ends that make you think somebody just ended up retrofitting an FC RX-7 turbo hood to a Mitsubishi because it just looked like fun. And then you find out, no, they actually came with that hood. And you're like, that's sweet. We should bring back hood scoops. Like, that should be a thing. Not only did the car do that, but it was also just funky and fun. You got electronic seat belts. How much more 80s can you get? All right, since you have the McPhersons, you can play around with the suspension a bit with coilovers or even air if you're feeling a little bit feisty. But most importantly, you have an older 4G63 engine that you can do just about anything with. And if you know anybody that has a 4G63 engine, those things are literally gold. They are the best thing you could possibly imagine, even though they have a tendency to not always be running. Is it reliable? Is it worth modifying? I don't know. I'm not sure about that. But would it be fun to throw it on the ground and scream around and listening to some Night Call by Kambinski? Yes, it would be, because it's an 80s coupe that has shapes on it, all right? Literally, you could put that thing in geometry class and you would learn about all the different types of shapes that you would need to know as a 9-year-old. All right, the Starion belongs on coilovers, most notably BC's, because BC literally has everything. I don't know how, I don't know why, but they do. All right, wheels you're gonna wanna keep to the smaller stuff just simply because the older style cars usually work better with smaller wheels. So you're probably looking at things like Work, NK, or Koenig for the market for wheels, and for tires, you're gonna wind up going with a meatier setup, usually staggered with a 225, 245 to fill those massive wheel wells. It's just kind of weird how they did the wheel wells back in the day. Throw some money at the motor and pray you don't get the DSM disease, and you're pretty much set to have a car that not many people know about, care about, or even would want to own. But if it's at a car show or at a track day or at an autocross or at an HPD, a lot of people are gonna ask you what it is. It's what makes them affordable. It's what makes them unique. I mean, you can park it next to a Mercer and then you and your 4 buddies can talk about how unique and rare your cars are, even though likely both of you are gonna have the cars on jack stands at the car show. The Mitsubishi Starion laid the framework for what would inevitably be the launch of the Talon Eagle Eclipse and helped actually found the interest in the Japanese forced induction Mitsubishi market overseas through Chrysler, Dodge, and of course Mitsubishi itself. And the partnership that those 3 companies had together continued to allow the importation alliance of this odd Japanese sports car. And then it built it into the cool shit that we know and love today. It became one of the cars that laid it down For the 90s boom, baby. The Starion was not one of those cars that made the list of the 90s, and it's not one you're gonna hear many people talk about, but it was the one that propelled those cars to the success that we now know and love. We don't see many of them, but we probably should. Whether as a Conquest or a Starion, whatever variant that you'd like to see it as, the world needs more unreliable, modified 80s cars that smell like old cigars and poor perfume. That's all I'm saying. But what do you think about the Mitsubishi Starion? Let us know in the comment section below. And of course, if you're looking for wheels, tires, or suspension, ow, it's cold in here. Be sure to check us out over at fitmentindustries.com. Of course, I'm Alex from Fitment Industries. We hope you enjoyed this video. We will see you later.